Hello and welcome. It was his vivid portrayal of life in Britain for South Asian immigrants that brought him fame and controversy for delving into edgy subjects such as racism and gay relationships. This week on One on One, meet the award-winning novelist and scriptwriter Hanif Kureishi. The mix of Pakistani and English blood made him quite unique at a time when the South Asian community was just starting to grow in Britain in the 1950s and 60s. Born in the English town of Bromley in Kent, where he was pretty much the only child of colour at school, Hanif Kureishi soon learned to fit in with his long hair and student activism. There's much speculation that the theme and characters of his books are a reflection of his own life, from the quirky experiences of an Asian boy growing up, depicted in the critically acclaimed screenplay for the 1985 film My Beautiful Laundrette, to a similar portrayal of adolescent awareness in The Buddha of Suburbia in 1990. Kureishi's novel Intimacy in 1998 focused on a man leaving his wife and two young children, soon after the writer himself had been through a similar experience. In spite of his denials, his family accused him of exploiting them with thinly disguised comments. Either way, the controversy failed to dent the quality of work Hanif Kureishi continues to produce, such as the 2006 screenplay Venus, featuring veteran actor Peter O'Toole, heavily nominated for awards for his performance. Hanif Kureishi's often controversially explicit take on sex, race and immigration may raise a few eyebrows, but he certainly provokes a lot of thought too. Hanif, it's a great chance to have a chat with you.
Thank you for having me.
You know, there's that old adage, write what you know. And in your case, you write a lot about, nationalism, race, sexual themes, and so on. How much of that, people ask this a lot about your work, though. How much of it is really autobiographical?
Well, you just see things around you and pick them up. But I get rather annoyed with the autobiographical thing because you spend so much time making it artificial. Making the characters, putting the jokes in, ordering it. So, for instance, in The Buddha of Suburbia, I may have been a kid that grew up in the suburbs with an Indian immigrant father and an English mother. And I may well have worn velvet trousers and had long hair. But that's just the start of it, Most of it is art and craft and really working hard at it to put it into a shape and form for other people. So it's mostly using the world that you have in an imaginative way. And that's what fascinates me about writing, about all writing. So it doesn't help that you write down something that happened to you yesterday. Lots of things happen to people yesterday, but making it into a story is a completely different matter and really quite difficult.
I wonder, though, with some of the themes that you have when they are very controversial, and of course taking into account your South Asian and Muslim heritage, do you get backlash? Do you find people say, why is he touching on these subjects? It's quite taboo in that culture and environment.
I did more at the beginning, particularly with my early plays, and then in '84 with My Beautiful Laundrette. Particularly in those days, because black and certainly Asian people were hardly ever on the telly, and they were certainly really rarely in films in the West. You never saw films then about immigration. All that really began to change with the publication of Midnight's Children, Salman Rushdie's second novel, a wonderful novel. And then My Beautiful Laundrette arrived, and suddenly people became aware that Britain had changed. In the 50s it was white, and by the 70s we were running all the shops.
You say you write about what's around you. Do you find do you see yourself as a social commentator?
I see myself as a storyteller. But I'm not a storyteller like, say, someone like Kafka, for instance, who writes stories set in a sort of ahistorical place or time. I'm interested in what people wear. I'm interested in their slang. I'm interested in what colour they are. I'm interested in the way in which people have children or get married or whatever. And that always takes place in a particular historical time and place.
But commenting on them is a different thing. Do you find that you feel you have to have some commentary in your books? Is there something that's judgmental at all?
Well, I was really interested, certainly at the beginning, in race and racism, because I grew up in South London in the 50s and 60s. And it was very violent and it was very racist, and people attacked us as a family, and particularly my father, all the time. So wanting to write about racism, wanting to tell people about what it was like to be called a Paki every single day was one of my one of the most important things I wanted to do. But I no longer think of that as being my point. In fact, I don't even know what my point is.
Well, do you find you target a particular sort of reader? Do you have someone in mind when you're writing?
It's an interesting question, because I do write for an audience. I'm not just doing it for myself, you know. I write for money to support myself and my family. I'm proud of that.
Do you consider the commercial value of something you write, though? I mean, would it change what you write because there may be a risk it may not succeed commercially?
Well, I write novels, I write short stories, I write essays, I write movies. You know, I'm always available for paying work.
So you have the range of work that allows you to express yourself?
Well, I can write a movie and then I can get some money, and then I can write some essays for which I get paid, you know, 200 quid, and then I can write some short stories for which you get nothing as well. Basically, what I want to do is live a free life, you know. Basically, I want to do, as my son says, you appear to do nothing all day. And I basically do nothing all day and make a living, and I've done very well.
Well, I was take you back to your early days. You were born in the mid-50s in Bromley, in England.
Yeah.
Father who was Indian roots, was then in Pakistan, and an English mother. That racial mix would have been very unusual at that time. Were you very aware of that? I mean, at a very early age?
I was made aware of the fact that I was the result of what they call a mixed marriage, though, of course, all marriages are mixed in all sorts of ways, as you know. I was made aware of that because of other people made me aware of it. So as soon as you go to school, people start calling you names and so on, and suddenly you think, I'm different to all these other kids. And in what way am I different? What does it mean? And you begin to feel, and indeed you are, really persecuted for ages. And as there weren't other people like me around, I was really the only Asian kid in my school. I mean, I'm much more confused and messed up than my children are. You know, they're also mixed kids, but they weren't mixed up in the way that I was. It was very violent, very tragic, and very difficult to get through, actually.
Your father had come to Britain after to study law, and then decided to drop out of that and go into. He worked for the Pakistani embassy for a while.
Yeah.
How did his character sort of affect you or influence you? What sort of did you get from him?
Well, I was thinking the other day that almost everything that my father was interested in, I'm still interested in. So he set me up, as it were, as I hope to set up my own three sons for life. By, you know, he loved music. I love music, he loved sport, and he really wanted to be a writer, and I still want to be a writer. He was fascinated by writing, by storytelling, and he was a failed writer, unlike me. There was a day when he would become a writer, and he would make money and, you know, be a professional writer. That was his dream, but he failed at it. But at least he showed me that it's, you know, discipline, telling stories, making characters, putting jokes in. All that stuff I learned at an early age. You have to learn to write. Someone's got to teach you. I didn't go to school or college to learn to write, but my dad taught me.
How did your mother Audrey cope with the fact she was in a mixed marriage at a time when, of course, it was something completely unknown at that you know, in that environment?
It was a really big deal then. But actually, my mother's family really liked my dad. Actually, and he was a really nice bloke. And also in those days, in the 50s, before really mass immigration, if you were an Indian, the only Indians people knew were like Indians from P.G. Wodehouse. You know, they were sort of Indian princes. So my dad was treated with great respect by my mother's family, actually.
What of her characteristics have rubbed off on you? What did you get from her?
My mother's really interested in things, actually. She was an artist. She had been a painter. She went to art school. And she always took me to the library. She took me to the library every day. And I still like books. I can see how amazing that is, because my sons, I've got 3 sons, none of them have read a book. None of them would read a book. You'd never go into a room and see one of my boys reading a book. But I read a lot. As they said to me the other day, they said, well, that's all you had to do in those days. There wasn't anything else. And it's true. You went to bed. You didn't have, you know, DVDs. You didn't have telly. We were so poor. So I love literature, I love stories, and I love books. Yeah, I still do.
Was it a happy childhood? Would you say it was happy, or at least content?
When I look back on it now, as you do, when you think of your childhood, when you're 10 years old, when you're 20, 30, 40, 50, you're always thinking about your childhood and who you are, and you think about it differently. And I think, actually, I was very lucky. I had a really stable childhood. and I was much loved by my parents. And I had a really interesting turbulence. I mean, being the victim of racism now and not being killed, not being sent to a camp, it was actually a really good thing for me. I learned a lot about the world, about how violent the world is and how difficult it is to deal with and how much hatred there is in the world and how badly you can be victimized. So I don't feel that the misfortunes I suffered, as it were so bad, actually.
You write about how you were in denial of your Pakistani roots for a long time, your South Asian roots. At what point did you become comfortable with them?
Well, I always thought if I wasn't an Asian, if I wasn't brown, then I wouldn't have all these problems. I'd be like everybody else, you know, white. And then I'd be okay. I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't go to school every day and have someone, particularly the teachers, calling me a Paki.
The teachers?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to forget that sort of casual racism. You go into school and the teacher would say, "Hey, Paki, you know, how are you today? What are you doing?" Or they call you. I had a teacher who would refer to me as Pakistani Pete, you know, and they would just talk to you like that all the time. So you forget how ingrained racism was, or how taken for granted it was in Britain in those days, actually, and how far we've come. And I think that's very important, Riz, to think about that. What a big achievement it's been, what a big deal it's been to move this country from that sort of racism to the sort of multiculturalism we have now.
Well, Hanif, I have many more questions for you. We're going to take a short break here. We're back with more one-on-one with Hanif Kureishi in just a moment.